Ok. Hola, buenas
Okay, then.
noches. Estamos en la primera de las entrevistas para la Netcon 01. Tenemos de invitado al señor James Wallis, que bueno, muchos conoceréis por maravilloso juego Érase una vez, que yo tengo destrozado. La caja está por el uso, hecha una auténtica basurilla, pero bueno. También del juego Paranoia, la última versión en español. This is the last Spanish version of the
Ah,
Paranoia RPG, and that was the first Spanish edition of Once Upon a Time.
I have a copy of that one on my shelf in my study.
I
Um,
suppose that. Bueno, como podréis imaginar, la entrevista va a ser en inglés, porque bueno, el señor James Wallis al cual agradecemos que esté aquí, pues habla inglés. Y nada, el asunto tratará un poquito pues de su carrera como autor, de cómo realiza los juegos de rol y de los story games. So, James, first of all, thank you for being with me tonight.
this is
Uh,
my pleasure and my honor.
okay, we are the first all digital convention. We don't know if we are the first convention that will be all digital in the world, or if we will have more people doing this thing.
It's a
But
very cool idea.
yes, we think of it because we couldn't afford to bring here to Spain and here to Galicia
Yeah,
many authors, because we are young people, we don't have much money,
hmm
and we spend the money on RPGs and card games and all sort of things. So well, that's how it is. And well, the first thing I was thinking, talking to you was about Ghostbusters RPG. Here in
hmm
Spain, we had an edition in Joc Internacional about many time ago, in 1990,
hmm
99. And I like it very much. It was perhaps the first D6 game, and it was one of the first games that had a lucky point system.
mm. Yeah,
So,
it's one of my favorite games of all time. I didn't, I should say, I didn't design it. I didn't work on it, but it's been a huge, huge influence on, I think, all of my game design. A lot of my game design philosophy comes out of. I'm sorry, I have a puppy literally sleeping 3 feet away, and he just fell off a cushion. If I look over there suddenly, it's because there's a small dog. So yes, I think it was an enormously influential game. It came out in terms of dice pools and hero points. It came out about the same time as the James Bond 007 game, which also did some of the same stuff. And I've talked to Chris Klug, who designed the James Bond game, and they were in contact with the guys at West End who were doing Ghostbusters at almost exactly the same time. So I think there was a shared influence there. But I love Ghostbusters because it captures the movie so
mhm,
perfectly. I think
yeah.
it's one of the best licensed RPGs of all time. It just captures the flavor of the movie, captures the humor of the movie, most importantly, which is really hard. Humor in RPGs is difficult. It's very easy to do an RPG rulebook that is
Mhm.
funny to read, but being able to carry that over into the gameplay is very, very hard. And Ghostbusters does it brilliantly. And it's one of the games that we're using as a primary influence for our work on the new edition of Paranoia, which, of
Mhm.
course, has some of the same creative team. The original Ghostbusters, I don't know if you know this, it was published by West End Games in New York, but it was actually developed by Chaosium. Primarily, it was developed by the people who did Call of Cthulhu. It was Lynn Willis and Sandy Peterson, I think, did most of the work on it, and Greg Stafford, I think, as well. And then Greg Kostikian at West End edited it. He, of course, was one of the prime movers on Paranoia, but was also the guy who did the first Star Wars RPG. So it's an amazing kind of all-star team who worked on that game, and I think it really shows.
Here we took a lot of inspiration on these 6 games. We have last year one of the most successful Spanish RPGs, and I can guarantee you will like it a lot. It's called Ablaneda, and if you can read some Spanish, it's a wonderful game. It's based on the DC system, but with some twerks in the systems called XD6, because Experience D6 system, and is one of the works that this year was granted one of the most, I don't know how to call it, most popular awards here in Spain, the Poliedro Game Award. It's like an award that we, people that made podcasts and made blogs and make videos about RPGs, give to other people that make RPGs. So it's like one of these awards that we like to do. We like to give to people. And I like a lot the mechanics with the simple D6, because you have a grasp how much you can attain with one simple roll. You can calculate very easy, very easy, if you must spend your lucky points or just hoard them like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key to it. That's the heart of a lot of really good game design. It's having a simple mechanic that presents the player with interesting or sometimes difficult choices, difficult decisions, and that gives rise to tactics and intelligent role play as well. Because you know what the right thing, the player knows what the right thing to do is, but the character would do something differently. So which way you go? It's that's what I try to do with a lot of my designs. Simplicity at the heart. There's nothing worse these days than getting a really thick rule book and just thinking, well, how much I really hope most of that is background, because I really don't want to have to learn just another set of rules that does the same thing as most of the other sets of rules. It just uses different dice to do the same effects. I'm so tired of that. I've been reading RPG rules, oh goodness, since the early 80s, and most of them are very, very much the same, and most of them are quite badly written, and they don't need to be anything like as long as they are. Simplicity is very underrated in the RPG industry.
Well, last in the industry, I have there's this tendency towards new system with more basic math and more basic systems. Like, I don't know if you follow the American industry with Apocalypse World and all its hacks and all the tendencies towards, okay, this is the basic mechanic, you have 3 or 4 choices, but you will play with a very basic system, and you will have a better grasp of how the game works. And we will talk about story games later, but the narrative of the RPGs and the stories you tell when you play RPGs is, I don't want a system that bothers me. I don't want a system that makes me to spend half an hour thinking if I'm doing the correct math or if I'm adding plus 15, then minus 20, then again I roll 3 dice, and I don't.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, when it comes to remembering an RPG session, I don't want to remember what rules were. I don't want to remember the dice rolls. I want to remember the story. I want to remember the pictures in my head. This epic adventure that we went through. I want to remember my sword cleaving the orc's neck in two. I don't want to remember, oh, I rolled an 18 there, but I had the following modifiers. That's not interesting. That's not story, or at least not to me. So yeah, I'm all about game story. I always have been. Creating an interesting narrative, which for me means either a verbal or a visual narrative, rather than one told in numbers and rules.
Yes, and this point leaves me to perhaps the next thing I wish to talk about is about, well, the story in the RPG games and story games, and what this will be later. First, we will talk a little about, well, Paranoia.
Okay, let's talk Paranoia.
This is one of my favorite games here. I have 3 editions of it. I have the first edition of 1987, perhaps, or
American was 1984. Yeah, I don't know when it came out in Spain. Now you can tell me. I've heard that it was quite controversial in Spain. There was a murder or something that the media associated with the game. Wrongly, because that's the media, that's what they do. But there's some it's a controversial game?
No, not at all. In 1993, there was 3 murders, and they were sadly, well, attributed to RPGs and people who play RPGs, but the youth and the people who was in the case involved, and all RPG media and all serious media, and even some writers have told that, hey, these people didn't do this. This was a madman who alleged that he was playing. So it was not so bad. And it wasn't Paranoia associated. It was more like Dungeons and Dragons, because it was the full boom of Dungeons and Dragons here in Spain, and everyone, myself or my friends, we were playing 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons, and my mom went to my to my bedroom, and she asked me, "Hey Pablo, why did this happen? Do your friends do these things?" And I told her, "No, of course not. You can watch us if you want. You can come. We can come to home and be here playing, and you can watch us. And I don't know, you will see what we do." And when she looked at 5 young men around a table yelling, "Yeah, I killed the orc!" Well, she just went to the kitchen, bring chocolate for all of us, and she told us, "Well, have a good time, goodbye," and she went with her friends. So in my case, I didn't saw so much pression. I know there is some people that put a lot of bad things into role playing, but I don't really think that a game and a leisure expression should bring so much hate.
I agree. Anyway, I'm sorry, I completely sidetracked you there. You were talking about Paranoia.
Yes, Paranoia is one of my favorite games about two things. One of these, you said earlier, is that it's a very fun game. It's a
Mm.
game where you machinate versus your co-players, and you play against them and cooperate with them, and also you have as a GM
Mm.
a total grasp on the game. You are okay. You are mine now, and I
Yeah.
will manipulate you. So it's so funny to play with the game, and also you have this wonderful setting about
Mm.
the mad AI, which our camarade, the computer,
Yes.
which is absolutely great to play, to make plots, underplots, underplots,
Yes.
underplots.
Yes. That's one of the things we're trying to do. Are incredibly lucky, myself and Grant Howitt and Paul Dean, who are all working on the new edition, because when I had my first meeting with Mongoose Publishing, who are the publishers, to discuss it, they said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to reboot it. I want to take it back to the first ideas." And I said, rather than just kind of do another sequel, I want to do a new version of the game. I want to change some of the background. I want to change some of the way the game works to get closer to what I think is the heart of the original game, which I think has got slightly lost over the last couple of decades, trying to make it. I don't know. You look young. I'm not. I'm not young. I bought Paranoia when it came out in 1984. People forget. People don't realize 1984 was a scary, scary time. The Soviet Union still existed. America was their president was a senile movie actor who talked to God. I genuinely believed I would not live to the age of 21. I thought I was going to die as everyone else was in believe that. And so for this game to come out and for the commies to be the bad guys, that was genuinely subversive. And now, of course, commies are the bad guys in the last edition. It's kind of, who's scared of commies now? No one's scared of communists anymore. So we thought, okay, we have to make this. We have to make it dark again. We have to bring the darkness back. And so we've created, the communists are still there. They're drinking their prison vodka and moaning about how no one cares about them anymore. But it's about terrorism now. It's about terrorists, and that doesn't mean Islamic terrorism. It's just the specter of terrorism. Anybody could be a terrorist. The person sitting next to you could be a terrorist. You could be a terrorist. In fact, it's paranoia. You are a terrorist, even if you don't know it yet. And
No,
we've tied that in quite a I think quite a nice loop. It's a lot of the secret society activities now. A lot of the secret societies, I believe they're working to save Alpha Complex. They think Alpha Complex is going wrong. It is headed for disaster. Most of them are right, but they're all working in different ways to try and save it because they all have a different vision of where Alpha Complex needs to go. And a lot of the ways they're trying to save it involves blowing stuff up. And that's terrorism. So you will be, you may well find yourself investigating a terrorist case that 2 sessions previously you created. Lots of that kind of stuff. So it's, we're working quite hard. We're trying to keep the jokes fresh. We're trying to do new jokes, but we're trying to get back to that whole style of you are your own enemies. Very much. We're updating all the technology as well because, again, in the early editions, the idea of a society where we were all watched all the time by closed-circuit TV cameras, that was kind of scary in the 80s and 90s. Today, that's everyday life. We're used to it now. So we had to up the stakes on the technology and make that a bit scary, or just different, just kind of creepy. So the idea is now that all the troubleshooters are the eyes and ears of the computer because you have a camera implanted in your retina and microphones implanted in your ear. So everything you see and hear, the computer also sees and hears and stores in its massive data banks forever and can access. So you can summon up video footage of people. If the system's working, quite often the Wi-Fi's down and nothing gets recorded as well. But you also have a heads-up display because the computer's got cameras and stuff in your eyes. It can project an augmented reality field in front of you. So you've got a GPS system built in there. You've got a little indicator that shows how many clones you've got left, how much ammunition. It looks a lot like a video game. But also you can, just by looking at someone, you can see how traitorous they are. People have stars that appear above their heads for their traitor rating, their loyalty rating. Anyone has 5 stars, it's open season. You can open fire on them. There's bonuses for killing them. There's a lot more as well. We're having a lot of fun with it. It is playtesting really, really well. But the main thing we've done, we've simplified the mechanics, as I was talking about. We've kind of taken some of the ideas from Ghostbusters. But we've also, I don't know anyone who's ever really played a campaign of Paranoia, who's ever played it as a long-term game. Everyone kind of plays it as a one-shot, or occasionally 2 or 3 one-shots in a row, or they might play it at a convention or a gathering. So we're gearing it all around single-session adventures in a way that you can take a bunch of single-session adventures and string them together with a story arc that will link everything together and give you an overarching narrative. But it's all about every session you play, beginning, middle, end. You get the complete story, assuming you don't all die horribly along the way. It's Paranoia. You will probably die horribly along the way.
Yes, that's the spirit of it.
Absolutely. And as I say, it's testing really, really well. We have a card mechanic now for combat, which was not actually our idea. Mongoose said, "Can you build cards into it?" And we were kind of, I suppose. And then we threw some ideas around, and it started to come together, and we are really, really pleased with the result we've got. It frees up players to do a lot of the kind of creative stuff now, rather than I shoot at the commie, or I shoot at the traitor. You've got a handful of cards that say that if you can get to a higher elevation, you've got a bonus on sniper shots, or you can do a dramatic stunt, or you spot a red fuel barrel down the corridor and you can shoot it and make it blow up. You can use the cards to alter the stuff to alter the environment. It works really well and really fast. The way I usually describe it is the original Paranoia was all about the GM digging a big pit and then pushing the players into it. Now, in our version, the GM digs a big pit and the players push each other into it. And I think that it just works much better. It is influenced by story games. The players have a lot more control of the narrative, if not the environment. As the players are active, the characters are the hapless fools they always have been. But the players have a little bit more control, so they don't feel. It makes life easier for the GM. The GM doesn't have to be inventive and funny all the time, because a bad Paranoia GM is just painful to watch and even worse to play with. So this is much more about the group making each other laugh. And I haven't laughed. I'm boasting, but I haven't laughed so hard as I've laughed at some of these Paranoia playtests for a very long time. We're really, really pleased.
One of the things that really established the Paranoia setting was the dark humor, that subtle dark humor in which, yes, you were talking to a robot and talking to the GM and the computer and trying to betray your friends and not to be betrayed by them. And here in Spain, we appreciate a lot this type of dark humor in which you have 6 lives, but you don't care about it, and just go with your rucksack full of communist or terrorist of take your stance propaganda, and here you go, take this with you, my friend, and then the big.
It's one of the things. I mean, Paranoia has always been a very American game, which is kind of interesting because the last couple of editions were co-written by Gareth Hanrahan, who is actually Irish, but a lot of the sensibility was very American. I think some of the humor was very American as well. And of course, Grant and Paul and myself are all British, so we're trying to bring a more European feel to it. I'm not going to say more cosmopolitan, but a little more kind of less brash, a bit more kind of subtle, the kind of thing you're talking about. One of the things we've done, I don't think I've said this anywhere else yet, in the box you'll get 3 books. You get the adventure book, the player's book, and the GM's book. And the player's book plays it completely straight. It makes it sound like this is an RPG in which you are heroic troubleshooters going out to vanquish the enemy of the computer, and that's your job, and here's your equipment, gung-ho citizens. And then the GM's book is, and this is how you kill the players, or this is how you kill the characters. This is what's really going on. The player's book does not admit out loud at any point that the computer is insane. It hints at it quite hard, but at no point does it say the computer is insane and the whole system's falling apart. But you kind of get the idea. Also, you start off as infrared now, or at least the very first time you play the new edition, you start off as an infrared citizen, just to kind of, or at least in the first adventure, because I don't think many players have actually played as infrareds. It's always kind of assumed that you just start the game as a red-level troubleshooter. And I think kind of fun to start off as the lowest of the low, just to know what it feels like, to know why you're so privileged to be a troubleshooter, and why you really, really don't want to be demoted down the chain of command again.
That's great. I'm just now thinking about a game of infrareds, just trying to be read and novel and trying to get the attention of the computer. Yeah, because computer is my only friend.
Oh yeah, the computer is our friend. I was talking to our friend the computer earlier on as we were trying to get Google Hangouts to work. And at that particular moment, yeah.
As I said earlier, I like a lot Paranoia. I like a lot because it's a wonderful game to just to imagine and to play in. We have also, in our little rock shell, we've talked about Once Upon a Time, story games, and Barón Munchaussen.
Yes.
And, well, that's one of my favorite story games. I talk about Once Upon a Time. I try to bring it to the table each time I go with friends. As you saw earlier, my copy is all used. My poor copy.
Those second edition boxes were really not very good.
No, I keep it in this box, which my girlfriend made to me because she didn't like that the cards were all there. Yeah. With interruptions and the aspects and all of it. This is a wonderful game. I like it because it is very easy to put in the mind of a child or a mother talking to his child and begin the story. Okay, once upon a time there was this big castle, and you play the castle, and you continue the story. We have an agreement in our table, so you must say at least 2 phrases, not 2 words, no. Yeah. You explain and expand, and then we interrupt you.
Yeah, I'm constantly amazed that people are still playing the game. It was something that myself and 2 friends, I mean, it was their idea originally. They had put together a very, very rough deck of cards on the back of some old business cards at a house party in 1990, I think, the beginning of 1990. And I saw this, and I was beginning my career as a games designer back then, and I went, this is a brilliant idea. it needs a lot of work. Can I work with you on it? And we put it, I think we refined it for 18 months. I took it to America, sold it to Atlas Games. Pretty much the first thing they said is, this is a really nice idea, but it needs more work. So we did another year's work on it. And it finally came out in 1993, the same summer as Magic the Gathering. So nobody paid any attention to it at all. But it's still out there. It still sells. And as you say, I think it works really well because it's not only a great introduction to narrative games and storytelling in games generally. Everybody knows fairy tales. Even if you think you're too grown up for them, you still know them, and you know all their tropes and archetypes and all the main characters and the settings, which is what makes the game work. But the other thing that I've dried up. Give me a second. Sorry.
Don't worry.
Yes, the other thing that I think is important about it, and I have little kids of my own these days. When you're a kid, you learn to do an awful lot of things that quite soon the adult world tells you are not important and you should forget how to do. Drawing is one of them. Drawing's enormously important. Creating stuff, making art to kids. And very, very quickly you get to 10 or 11 and your art teacher goes, you can't draw. You shouldn't draw. Draw it, you know. But storytelling is another one. And we learn as kids to tell stories and we love it. And then we either forget how, or it just seems less important, or there's the venues, the opportunities to tell stories, to make up stories, just go away. And Once Upon a Time lets you rediscover that and revel in it, the joy of just creating stuff. And it doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to become, you know, it doesn't have to be great art. It doesn't have to be publishable. It's just a story that's fun because you're telling it as a group. And they're always... You look back on some of the Once Upon a Time stories, and every game you play does tell a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. They're not great stories at all, but they kind of make sense as you're playing them, and they're enjoyable, and people remember. It's like an RPG. You remember the good bits. An awful lot of it you could just kind of forget because it's, you know, the same. But the good bits, the funny bits, the exciting bits, the really clever, inventive bits, you remember those. And yeah, I'm really proud of it. I think we continue to work on it and refine it as a game, and we're doing expansions for the third edition, which is out at the moment. You know, I'm delighted that people play it. I'm delighted that you know, a lot of the ideas from it have been picked up and that other people are using them as well. That it's kind of created this little niche of storytelling games within the games industry.
Yes, I really like that. It not only helps you to make a narrative and a story out of your mind, it also helps with people that you want to begin to roleplay. Because I myself have used Once Upon a Time, Eras una vez, here in Spain, to introduce new players to the narrative in RPGs, and hey, you like this game, you perhaps like to play a different narrative. You perhaps want to have more impact in what's happening, more impact in what are you doing, and more impact on the story. And why don't you try tomorrow or next week or next month to come to our sessions and play with us to the game of the month or whichever we are playing. And I think that's impressive.
Yeah, I think it's kind of acquired the status almost of a gateway game. It gets people in. Back in the bad old days of the early 90s when it first came out, I remember demonstrating it at a lot of conventions. And the thing I would hear over and over again, this is when the games hobby was very, very male. There weren't an awful lot of girls around. But people would play Once Upon a Time and they would say, my girlfriend doesn't play games, but she'll play this. And that was just the, you know, fantastic compliment that that people will get their first real taste of gaming, the first game that they really enjoy from Once Upon a Time. And I've subsequently met people who have kind of got into gaming through it, and thank goodness. It makes me start again. It makes me very proud. And I should credit here Andrew Ralston and Richard Lambert, my other designers on it. They're still very involved. It's a group effort. It's the three of us who developed the game and continue to build on it.
Yes, and the other game that got published here in Spain, another of your creations, or you are in the middle of it, is the Barón Munchaussen game. There are some people that, like me, that like this type of games a lot because there's more in the RPG territory than Once Upon a Time or that other games. I don't know because we can catalogate it as an RPG. I catalogate it as an RPG because for me it works like many RPGs work, and I like a lot the system that I bet I don't know 5 cents that you can't explain why the Baron Munchausen got to the moon and went back.
Yeah,
that was wonderful.
It's fun. I'd spent a long time in the mid-90s trying to design a regular role-playing game around the Baron Munchausen stories, which, do you know about the Baron Munchausen stories? Because some people do and some people don't. It's a selection of larger-than-life, not exactly folk tales, but kind of after-dinner tales, supposedly told by Baron Munchausen, who was a real character. And they were published about 1780. And there's been movies and so on. And I tried to do a regular RPG in which you play either Baron Munchausen or one of his characters. And it didn't work, and it didn't work. Whatever I tried, it just didn't work. And then I was in the shower one day, and I was thinking, well, why doesn't it work? Well, because they're stories. They never happen. They're only ever told over a drink. So what I need to design is an RPG where you tell stories over a drink. And went, bang! I had the whole thing. It just appeared in my head in not exactly a flash of lightning, probably good because I was in the shower and that would have been complicated. But it was, I suddenly had this game, and it's half a page of rules. That's the whole game. You can't sell half a page of rules. So then I had to find a way of kind of turning it into a book. And the story goes that my ancestors, John and Edward Wallis, who again, these are real characters. After I'd been in the games industry for about 10 or 12 years, I discovered that my ancestors had been publishing board games in London in the late 18th century, early 19th century, around 1800 or so. Not very good board games. So the story goes that John Wallis meets Baron Munchausen around the year 1796, 1797, commissions him to design a game. He designs this avant-garde role-playing game, which John quickly realizes is unpublishable, and buries in the family papers, which I, 2 centuries later, discover and publish, which is how it became a book rather than half a page of rules. So yeah, I'm delighted that people love it and play it, because whereas Once Upon a Time is a kind of an easy-in game. It's easy to start playing. Baron Munchausen, you challenge each other to tell our stories. It's, oh, my dear Baron, tell me of the time you accidentally got the Pope pregnant. And you just have to start telling the story. And that's scary, particularly for people who don't play a lot of storytelling games and don't do a lot of role-playing and who aren't very drunk. Being drunk is kind of important to the game. If you've never done it before, it's like jumping off a high diving board. It's really scary. You don't know what's at the bottom. But the way the game works with the interruptions, again, that sounds like it's going to be scary. But actually, they give you handholds. Each interruption that comes in, it gives you a little pause to think about things, but also an element that you can choose to build into your story or not. And it's one of those, for something that just appeared in my head in 10 seconds, the structure is actually really, I'm amazed how robust it is and how well it stands up. I think it wasn't, obviously there were games like Once Upon a Time, and there was an American game called Dark Cults, and there was John Tynes' Puppet Land, but Munchausen was kind of the first story game as we now understand story games. It took the ideas of role-playing and transferred them into something else where there was no GM. The narrative was more important than the characters. And it was a surprise. It was a runaway success. I was really surprised. And I owe an awful lot of that to Ken Hite, if you know Ken's work. Ken is a major RPG writer. He does a lot of Cthulhu work. He does a lot of work with Pelgrane Press, who I share an office with. But at the time, he was a games reviewer, and he went round Gen Con 1998, thrusting copies of Munchausen into people's hands, going, "You have to read this." And if Ken Hite tells you to read a book, you read that book. And so it became a success. And so off the back of that, I started what I called the New Style line as part of my company, Hogshead Publishing. And we did we didn't call them story games, we called them New Style games. But it was the same idea. It was games that break the style of role-playing and do something different with it. We published a game called Pantheon by Robin Laws. We published a thing called Violence by Greg Kostikian, who I've mentioned before. John Tynes' Puppet Land we republished. And we published a fantastic Polish game called De Profundis, which is a role-playing, storytelling Cthulhu game that you play by writing letters to people, literally.
I have it.
Posting letters. It's lovely. I love that game so much. I wish I'd written. Of all the games that we published, I wish I had written De Profundis. It is so good. And I think that, I hope at least, that was what encouraged a lot of other people to just take the idea of role-playing and just push it that bit further. But of course, at the same time, people like Vincent Baker and Paul Sessagy and others were coming up and doing and Jason Morningstar, many others doing amazing work. So I don't know. I think I was on the crest of the wave. I don't know if I created the wave, but I'm very pleased to have been there for the start of it.
Yes, we here in Spain have, by the hands of Edge Entertainment, one of our main publishers, all this line of new wave. It was late 90s.
Late 90s, early 2000s, yes.
And well, it was a blast. It was something new. Nobody was doing this. Nobody was telling you to write a letter to your friends as if you were the people, the character, writing that letter, and go to your public library down the street and study that books. There's the answers you are looking. And
the other thing in that game, in De Profundis, is the idea of solo role-playing by just walking around your street, your town, or wherever you live, looking out for things you've never noticed before, and trying to work out how they fit in with the Cthulhu conspiracy, which is potentially a game, I think, that could send people mad. I'm quite pleased to have actually published a game that I think might drive people insane. But I don't think anyone has gone mad. I don't know if people have played it that way, but it's just such a lovely idea. A lot of what I've tried to do in not just my game design but my game publishing as well is push ideas out there, push out concepts for other people to use, because when the whole of games design is based, designers working off other people's ideas. It's like recipes. You take a recipe, you adapt it, you develop it, you bring in some new ingredients. It's almost never does anyone actually, people think about it as game designers as creating ingredients, but that happens maybe once or twice a decade, something like deck building or collectible card games, or HeroClix was a completely new idea, the idea of the figures with the dials in the bases. These things, the big ideas are very, very rare. But new ideas, new recipes based on new ways of mixing up the existing ingredients, that's what it is. And if anyone, throwing out new ideas of ways that you can use the ingredients differently. You know, if someone does that, if someone takes one of your ideas and runs with it, it is the greatest compliment imaginable. It's wonderful. I know a couple of designers who get very annoyed when they say, "Oh, this you took my idea and did something," but it's like, no, be proud of that. None of us would be here if it wasn't for Gary Gygax. Gary Gygax had got sniffy when other people started doing RPGs back in 1975 or 1976. We would be sitting here probably talking about computer. Actually, we might not be talking about computer games because so much of modern computer game rule systems and game design is based on the stuff that Gygax and Arneson did, the core mechanics, the core structure that they developed in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm ranting. Dungeons and Dragons rant, I do fairly often, but that game, it's old and clunky by today's standards, but my goodness, Dungeons and Dragons was genius when it came out. It got so much right with no precedent, nothing kind of leading up to it. Their building blocks, I don't know where they got all this stuff from, but levels and experience points and the idea of setting it all in a dungeon, a constrained environment, where your vocabulary of actions is limited, so there's less of a burden for a novice GM. It's superb. It's so good.
No,
my admiration for those guys.
There in UK, you have one of the prime settings, or authors that were publishing for Dungeons and Dragons and all these fine film folio and all these new kinds of viewing of monsters and new kinds of viewing this setting. And also we can't forget that Games Workshop is from UK, one of the main industry giants.
In the UK, it's difficult to forget that Games Workshop is from the UK. They're kind of everywhere.
You are in the shadow all the time.
Oh yeah.
But
I used to do a lot of work with them. Because we published Hogshead Publishing published Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay under license, and I wrote some books for them as well, and I've done some consulting for them. They're a unique company. There is nowhere in the world like Games Workshop.
I know that you today act as a consultant of different authors and game publishers and people trying to get his dream, because here in the RPGs industry and in the games industry, we are not talking about, if you are Wizards of the Coast or if you are Games Workshop, yes, we can talk about money. But we, the small publishers and the small authors and the people that work because we love what we do, we want to publish our dream. And this takes me to the perhaps final part of this half interview, half rant, half conversation.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of
Don't worry.
this evening. You've got me, yeah.
I like a lot. This is strange to hear people talking about what they like and what they like so much. No, you have to be a great fan and a great author to just give that much love to RPGs and to us, the humble fans that are talking to you. And the last bit of this strange interview and all of this is about Kickstarter. This is you have your last project. One of your last projects was Las Vegas, a game of bad luck, and you are almost finished it.
Almost. It's so close. It's so close now.
Okay, I have faith in you. Don't worry. I know that Kickstarter and all the new platforms are a hard platform. We were talking the past week here with one of my friends, which is one of the most viewed video bloggers here in Spain. Jesus is well, he will publish a RPG called Nexus, which is a sci-fi RPG.
I've heard about this. Yeah.
Yes, he counseled his his Berkami, which is like a Kickstarter, and because he felt like the platform itself constrained him, it say that it's not good for authors. It's good for money and it's good for, okay, I have this idea, I want it done, and I have a lot of people that supports me. But it also, on the bad side, it has all this pressure on you that you must finish it now for me because I paid it, and that's so good. That's horrible. And, when I give my money to an author or to people that make a project, and I'm of the bakers of Las Vegas, I don't mind. You take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. You have to develop. You have to be creative. You have to have your own ideas. You have to write, and most of all, you have to have liberty. You have to have wings. You have to fly. I didn't put my money on something so I can get it tomorrow. Okay, I think that part of the development of an RPG or other games is what I said earlier. It's your dream and it's your illusion, and it's also an art. So the art isn't rushed. You don't talk with Miguel Angel. Hey, Miguel Angel, is the Capilla 16 done tomorrow?
Yeah.
It's wrong to be decorated with your beautiful next statue next week. It doesn't work that way.
I don't know. I think a lot of the kind of the Renaissance art, the people we think of as the great artists of history, did have time constraints. They were under time pressures because the people they were working for wanted the art, sooner rather than later. And there was the concept of the artist, as we understand it today, didn't really exist. I think I agree with you to an extent that Kickstarter puts a pressure on you. I think if you can develop a game without knowing whether it has an audience at all, and which is kind of what I did with Munchaussen. The reason I did Munchaussen, to go back to that, I had been running Hogshead Publishing for 3 years at that point, and Hogshead was created to publish my game designs, and for various reasons didn't. I didn't have the time to write the games because I had to do all the stuff to keep the business afloat. And I just wanted to publish something with my name on it. And I didn't care if it sold. I just wanted it out there from my company. And so I did this little 24-page game called The Extraordinary Adventures of Baron Munchaussen. I was not expecting it to take off. I was not expecting it to still be in print 15 years later. So that was a game I did, I'm not going to say for the art of it, but for the love of it, for the passion of I think this is a good game. I have no idea if anyone's going to buy it or not. But most of the projects I work on, and this includes Las Vegas, I do with one eye to the market, to whether they're going to sell, whether they're going to find a player base, because really there isn't much of a point in doing a game if no one is going to play it.
Yes.
So, Las Vegas I put up there because I thought it was commercial. I thought people would be interested in it, and as it turned out, they were. I asked for £3,000. It raised £24,000. The trouble is, wasn't sure that the Las Vegas was £24,000 worth of game. I didn't think it was worth that much. And I had this huge crisis of confidence. I went, oh, well, I'll have to go back and redo a lot of it. And then because of that and because of a number of other things in my personal life, it just got horribly delayed. I'm really pleased with the way it's turned out. But you do see this with a bunch of creative people on Kickstarter that, you know, they start a project and then they have problems finishing it. I think Kickstarter works much better with projects that people go, I have been developing this on my own time. I just need the funding to print it, the funding for the art, the funding for the last stage. Going to Kickstarter and saying, I have an idea, fund it, that's asking for trouble. And I think you actually see a lot of those projects fail. But certainly, I mean, role-playing was not a big industry before Kickstarter came along, nor board games really. It's breathed a huge amount of life into what was slowly dying and is now, because creators can find their market, they can find their audience, the people out there who really like their stuff but who don't go to the game shops regularly and don't follow the RPG bulletin boards and message boards. It's liberated a lot of creators to do their dream projects and allowed them to earn a decent living as well, which is fantastic. And on that level, it's an amazing thing.
Yes, I think that well, it's a great platform, and as you said earlier, is a platform that gives you that visuality towards the world, towards your audience, towards people, but you don't think that it also gives you a bad thing because of these people that get there only to say, hey, give me my game tomorrow, please, give me my game tomorrow, and you get frustrated and say, oh my god, no, please, I'm working on it, I'm having personal problems, I'm having a lot of things that they aren't going so well, so if you continue in this way, there's there's no way I can produce it on time.
Yeah, I think if one if you're working in the games industry, you should be. If you're working in any form of publishing or any form of creative production, you should be able to create stuff to a schedule. And I've having worked as a journalist and worked creating really, really bad novels and books tying in with movie video games for major publishers. Their deadlines are horrible. There was a moment where I spent 8 months waiting for a book contract to come through, and it didn't. And I finally took a full-time job, and then the contract came through, and it's like, okay, we need these 2 books from you. So these were solo game books based on Sonic the Hedgehog. This was the early 90s. 2 books, we need them in 3 months. Wait, how long? You've messed me around for 8 months waiting for this. Yeah, well, that was just the licensing. Now you've got 3 months, and we need to get this because we need it out by a particular date. And that kind of thing. And you have to write, and you're aware that the work is not necessarily going to be good, but you have to do it. I agree that for creators to do their very best work, a time constraint, particularly a fierce time constraint, is not good. There's the old saying about cheap, good, fast. Choose any 2, because you'll never get all 3 together, and that's conventional manufacturing. But yeah, there were people who were pressuring me the whole way. But at the same time, without those people behind me on a Las Vegas pushing me forward, I might still be writing it. It's difficult with a creative project that's very close to your soul or close to your heart that you've been thinking about for a long time. And I have been thinking about Las Vegas for a long time. It's difficult to let go. It's difficult to know when to say, right, we're done. It's finished. The temptation is always to go, well, I could improve this bit. I could rewrite this bit. I could make it better here. The hardest thing for an artist is to say it's finished. Sorry, I'm not saying I'm an artist, but for anyone doing creative work, saying this work is now done is very, very hard. I'm the same with Munchausen. I'm doing the 3rd edition of Baron Munchausen later this year, as soon as I finished Paranoia. And that's adding new material to it, but it's refining the old stuff as well, because I'm not happy with some of it. Just tightening it up, tweaking the jokes, making it just a little bit better each time. I don't think I'll ever be completely happy with it.
That's one thing about RPGs and about everything that got tight rule set, because even if you have 30 or 3,000 pages monster, you will never have this role here needs more tweaking, this role there needs a bit of luck touch, and also if you think after about the setting, you are okay. I have this wonderful idea. I have to put this. I have to put in the book that you can play with the head of the baron in one scene and the body of the baron in another scene, and you can perhaps have a conversation between both. I don't know. All the time you have to deal with the unpreparedness and well, this is complete, and I can compare that you as an author. You are never complete. You always want more and more and more and more and more.
Yeah, I think any author who's ever happy with a book, who is contented with a book, is probably not trying hard enough. I don't think I've ever written anything that I'm completely happy with. Everything I wish I'd had more time on, or I wish I'd done it differently.
Okay. So
there's always the next project.
Now we have some questions from our 7 viewers. Woo!
Oh, wow.
Only 7 people, but well, this it's a strange hour here in Spain for this type of interview, and as it will be tomorrow or later in YouTube, I expect that then people will watch it more. But here in
I'll try and follow. If anyone wants to ask questions on the YouTube comments, I'll follow that for a while and we'll answer anything there.
Nah, don't worry. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 questions here.
Cool.
One of the questions is, do you think the people are now more compressive with the RPG fans than in the 80s? If there in UK there's more comprehension towards our hobby, more, I don't know, more, it's more normal, more extended.
So I'm not quite sure on there were a couple of sound dropouts as you were saying that. The relationship between creators and the fans, is that the question? How that's changed?
The question about creators and fans, and about the RPGs as a whole, if they are more, I don't know, more popular, more, they get more attention, or perhaps it's still as it was in the 80s.
I don't know. The market is a lot smaller these days. Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder are still the big two. There was a while where Pathfinder was outselling Dungeons and Dragons. I think D&D 5 has flipped that on its head now. But if you're not one of those games, then that for a long time your market share, the number of people playing RPGs has declined and declined, and I think that encouraged the kind of the hardcore, what a friend of mine used to call lifers, people. We're going to be playing these games for the rest of our lives. Let's be honest here. We know that already. It's encouraged those people to form, because the space is smaller, it's a more intimate space, and it allows fans to communicate much more easily with the creatives, particularly because of Facebook, Twitter. I mean, even things like RPGNet in the 90s and the previous decade, there was a sense still of, you know, a creator posted there. They were still a step up above everyone else. But Twitter and Facebook, it's a great leveler. You're all on the same level. Yeah, so I think there's a greater communication. And sometimes that boils over into aggression. And as you say, people being dissatisfied with late delivery on Kickstarters or a Kickstarter or any project not being quite what they expected. And I don't know if this has boiled over in Spain at all, but the Gamergate stuff that's happened in America in the last few months, thankfully hasn't really touched tabletop gaming that much, except that one of the noted Gamergaters is British and is an RPG designer. And that there's a sense of it having poisoned what was previously, it wasn't a perfect atmosphere by any means, but people are a lot more cautious now about what they say in public, particularly on political views, radical views, left-wing views, even right-wing views as well. There's an intolerance that is uncomfortable it's difficult to do good creative work if you're just constantly looking over your shoulder, afraid about who might come back and say, I disagree with this, you have offended me in some way. There was the thing just in the last few days with Monty Cook's, was it The Strange? Did you hear about this?
Yes.
There was a thing about there's a Native American realm, or based on the Native Americans, and a group of Native Americans protested that his portrayal of them was unfair. I haven't read it, I don't know the nuances, but that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. That the protest would not have happened. People might have complained, but there would not have been an organized protest, and Monty Cook would not have made a public statement and changed his game in a few days. And that's a really different atmosphere, and I'm not sure some publishers really know how to handle that. I was talking to someone just this afternoon, I won't say who, but a role-playing game publisher, and he was saying that they haven't had a case like this one, like the Monty Cook one, but they know at some point, no matter how careful they are, somebody is going to be very offended at something they publish, and there will be an online petition and a hue and cry, and it's going to get ugly for them. And that kind of thing takes up a huge amount of headspace as it's happening, and it's very difficult to concentrate on doing good work while it's going on. Does that mean it shouldn't happen? No, I don't think it. I think some of it is enormously useful, but it is as the questioner said, it is not the same as it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's very, very different.
Okay, thank you. And there is more questions right here. One of our viewers asks if you know any Spanish RPG.
Do I know any Spanish RPGs? That's a very good question. We were talking about that when I was running Hogshead. Around the year 2000. There was a scurrilous game about teddy bears, I think. A kind of a satirical game about stuffed animals or teddy bears. I'm trying to remember the name. It was kind of digest format. It was small size, and it was very funny. And we thought about doing it as a new style game, and decided and talked to a few American distributors, and they just said, well, the Americans won't buy it, basically. The Americans wouldn't find it funny. I think perhaps it was too European or too Spanish. I cannot remember the name of it. That's embarrassing. And that's probably not representative of the Spanish games. The trouble with the RPG market is it's very, very English language dominated, and it's quite usual for an English language RPG to be translated into usually French, German, Italian, Spanish, sometimes Portuguese. It's very rare for a non-English language RPG to be translated into English. It almost never happens, and that's a real shame. I know of fantastic games in all sorts of countries. There's some brilliant. I mentioned De Profundis was Polish. There are other fantastic Polish games I'd love to publish. But I would have loved to publish when I had a publishing company, which I don't really anymore. Yeah, so I'm sorry. I wish I did. You were talking about one earlier on. I'd love to see a copy of it.
Okay. Yeah. More questions here.
Okay.
So, what's that? Okay. Do you think anytime that the role-playing games will get a perfect definition of what role-playing is, that everybody understands? That's a hard question.
No, I don't think we will. I think we tried very hard in the 70s and the 80s and some of the 90s when there was just one thing that was role-playing. But since then, role-playing has spread out to be such a wide field of of narrative and different styles of game, different types of game. I don't think we'll ever get a concise definition of what a role-playing game is. I think it may take a different style of game to. I don't know. I've tried myself to come up with a concise definition of it. It's tricky. Interactive storytelling generally is a difficult thing to define. You were talking about introducing people to games by making them play the games. I think that's the easiest way of doing it. Show them what it is, don't tell them what it is. It's one of the primary rules of writing fiction. Show, don't tell. And it's what makes games work. It's what makes people understand what it is we do.
Okay, and we have only 2 questions left.
Okay.
Well, perhaps that's all.
I may have to take these fairly quickly because my wife is getting hungry.
Yes, me too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, here in Spain, your work isn't so well known as I expect, but people are asking, in what are you working? We told earlier that you are now working on a new edition of Paranoia, and you are working on a new game called Las Vegas, which is soon finished, and then you will work in a 3rd edition about the Barón of Munchaussen. But I can think that people are asking us, what are your projects on your minds? What are you working on in your mind? What will you do on a future? And if you can give us a preview of what you have in mind.
Okay, it's the big things I'm thinking about at the moment. I can't talk too much about this, but I have a Doctor Who project coming up, working with Cubicle 7, who do the Doctor Who role-playing game. This new project, it is not a role-playing game. It's more of a story game. It's kind of a Doctor Who story game, but it's kind of more than that. I'm really excited by it. I haven't started writing it yet. As soon as Paranoia is done, as soon as Las Vegas is done, I will go to work properly on that. Las Vegas, obviously. Expansions for Once Upon a Time. I also have a couple of variants of Once Upon a Time with different rules. I've overhauled the rules and I've simplified them. One is called Once Upon a Time in a Galaxy, and one is called Once Upon a Midnight Dreary. So they're science fiction and horror, respectively. And the thing I want to do later on this year, I want to start an academic journal about interactive narrative and storytelling in games, which is carrying on from some work I was doing 20 years ago with a magazine I founded and published called Interactive Fantasy. I think interactive storytelling is at a stage now that it needs some analysis. It needs a focal point for the analysis that's going on about it, both from the academic end, but also from the game design end. And and I really want to do that. I think there's a good market for it. I think I might be able to do it this time without losing money, which I lost quite a lot of money on interactive fantasy 20 years ago. But I think this time the market's there. I hope, anyway. So those are the big things that are taking up my time. And there's loads of little designs for board games and card games. But those are the kind of things I can throw together in a couple of evenings and then play test them and see if they work. Stuff that I think is good, stuff that I'm excited by, but nothing that keeps me awake at night. That would be the Doctor Who thing, which is I love Doctor Who. This is kind of a dream project for me, and the journal as well, which will probably be called Playful Stories.
Okay, well, thank you for being with us tonight.
My pleasure.
For giving us such wonderful conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will now greet our audience and thank them. So, sorry, I will talk a little in Spanish. So. Gracias a todos por vernos. Espero que os haya gustado la entrevista con el señor James. Como veis, es una de las personas que es más agradable hablar con ellos en esto del rol. Y nada, espero que os haya gustado. Ya sabéis, darle a me gusta y suscribiros. Now, I tell them that they should subscribe to my channel, which only has this interview. It doesn't has anymore. Well, it has an UFO video, which I use for a game of conspiracy, but nothing more. And well, thank everyone which has seen us.
Thanks to everyone who's watched me rant my way through the evening.
Okay, thank you, James.